Hello, and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today is podcast number 1850. The topic is training, and the title is, How Can I Look Like Chris Bumstead? If you don't know who that is, he just won for the 5th year in a row the Classic Physique Mr. Olympia. So he's pretty badass and very famous in the bodybuilding world. One of my clients who is getting into bodybuilding, they haven't really decided until recently whether they wanted to eventually do regular bodybuilding or classic physique. So classic physique, you'd still wear like the little posing trunks. You still do poses like front double biceps, most muscular, all the typical stuff you'd see, like if you're familiar with how Arnold Schwarzenegger used to pose and like the type of competitions he did. So it would still be that. But that category, men's classic physique, is a little different than men's open bodybuilding. In open bodybuilding, they're really going for mass and incredible leanness. The mass should have some aesthetic prettiness to it. But they really just want mass. The bigger you are, typically the better for the most part. Now, shape does matter, but mass is kind of more important. For men's classic physique, it's the other way around. Shape is a higher priority, like symmetry and balance is a higher priority than total mass. You can't be, significantly further behind than your competition in mass, but if they have two people who are similar in build, they won't pick the biggest one, they'll pick the one that's more balanced. So classic physique would be more like back in Arnold's day versus open bodybuilding if you're familiar with like Ronnie Coleman. Those would be two people to look up. So if you compared pictures of Arnold back in his day, when he was winning Mr. Olympia, and then Ronnie Coleman, put a picture of them side by side, you would see a pretty good variance of what classic physique nowadays looks like compared to open bodybuilding. You could also just compare Derek Lunsford, who just won the Open Mr. Olympia bodybuilding, with Chris Bumstead. So you could also just compare the people who just won. But I think you would get more of a visual difference comparing Arnold and Ronnie. So with that in mind, my client, who is pursuing something in the bodybuilding classic physique realm, they just want to get bigger, leaner, and be freaking awesome. They sent me a message just this past weekend. They were watching the Mr. Olympia competition, and when Chris won for the 5th time, they sent me this message at I think it was 1 a.m. or something. They wrote, "I am really fired up. I want to dig deeper and really push for a pro card. I am already living that lifestyle like 90%. I want to go the last 10% and really do this. I want to look like Chris Bumstead. I love his physique. What do I have to do from here?" So we went through and we actually talked a little bit about the specifics for that client. But what I wanted to do in today's podcast was just discuss, what does it take? What did it take for Chris Bumstead to look like Chris Bumstead? So how did he look like the best version of himself? So therefore, you can think of, how can I look like the best version of myself? That's what I want you to think of. So don't try to be Chris Bumstead, but be what Chris Bumstead is for Chris Bumstead. Meaning, he became the best physique of what he had capable. And I want you to be able to do the same if you'd like to. So there's going to be 4 areas we're going to look at. They're a little bit of common sense. I understand. Just stick with me and keep listening. But the first one is going to be nutrition. The first thing I'm going to highlight out of all of this is consistency. So Chris Bumstead didn't eat well and train hard for 6 months to become who he is. He did it for 10 plus years. 10 plus years where it was likely the number 2 or 3 priority in his life. So I believe he's Christian because I've listened to some interviews and stuff, and he has talked about Jesus and being a Christian. I don't think the interviews he's never said I am Christian, but he talks a lot about religion. So God or his spirituality is probably number 1 for him. And then I believe he has a girlfriend or he's married. So I'm sure that's probably a tie with himself. So he has, demands on him. He has priorities in life. So him being the best version of himself is going to have to be up near the tippy top. So he's going to put what he needs to do to be his best self before going and hanging out with friends at the bar. He's not going to go to the bar. He's going to say, hey, if you want to come over to my house, lift weights and eat some chicken breast, hell yeah, let's do it. But he's not going to forego what is his best for someone else. So if somebody calls him and says, hey man, I need you to help me move. I need to carry some furniture out of my house. I need some odds and ends done. Would you mind coming over? He's probably going to say no, because he doesn't want to risk getting injured. He doesn't want to risk burning a crap ton of calories when he's supposed to be building muscle that day. He's probably going to say no to that. Would he help them in any other way? Probably, but he's probably going to say no to helping friends move. He's going to prioritize what is best for him so he can be consistent with his nutrition and his training. So consistency is absolutely paramount. Anything I talk about in the rest of the podcast doesn't work if you only do it for a couple weeks, couple months, or even just a few years, 2 or 3 years. It's going to take longer than that to see the full potential of what you can become. Now, what's exciting is, even after just a couple weeks, you're going to start to see some change. After a couple months, even more change. After a year, huge change. 2 years, huge change. You're going to see progress along the way. But it's important to keep in mind, for this client, for example, if they want the pro card, from where they are to getting a pro card, this client is actually not far off. Probably a good solid 6 months to a year, more so to the year probably, they're going to get it, a natural pro card. Because they have really good muscle separation. They have a very small bone frame, but yet they have big muscles. You can see really good muscle size on their frame. So they're kind of the genetics that everyone hates because we didn't have it. But this person has earned it. They've worked their ass off. They're doing a great job. But they also do have good genetics to kind of back up that work. Then the same would have been true for Chris Bumstead. Great genetics to start with, and then you put in top quality, best in the world type discipline and effort, you're going to get the best in the world 5 years in a row. Makes sense. So for nutrition, we're looking at calories, eating the right amount of calories for whatever the season is. If the season is for you to be in a controlled surplus for maximum muscle growth, that's what you're doing. If the season is for you to be in a controlled deficit for fat loss but maintain the muscle that you've worked so hard to build, that's what you do. So whatever is the correct season, you're going to be in that correct calorie range pretty much every day. When I help people get ready for competitions, they might mess up 1 day out of 14, so 1 out of every 2 weeks. But it's usually not even that. It might be just once a month. For a good 3, 4, 5, 6 months of prep time, they might only mess up once or twice in a whole month. If you're messing up 3, 4, 5 times a week, you don't have to all of a sudden go to 1 time a month for you to see any results. You literally just have to mess up 1 less time. So if you're averaging missing 4 meals a week, if you just go down to averaging missing 3 meals a week, you're going to see progress. That is motivating. That's exciting. That's a little bit addicting. And now all of a sudden you're going to try to get down to only 2 mess-ups a week, then 1, then maybe 1 every 14 days. But to give you a reference point, when I get people ready for competitions, they really do only mess up 1 or 2 days a month. All the other days, they're in their calorie target window. Second thing we never mess up is protein. They really don't ever mess this up. It's kind of the same thing as calories. If they ever miss it, it's once or twice a month. Then we're looking at meal timing and macronutrient choice. What we're doing with meal timing and macronutrient choice is we're controlling protein synthesis. Protein synthesis is the formation of new muscles. There's a lot of other things. But if we're looking at it for bodybuilding purposes, that's kind of the aspect of protein synthesis that we're looking for, is we're wanting to form new muscle tissue. That is a 24/7 job for the body. If you feed it correctly and you train correctly, you can have accruing muscle, like muscle growth, in very, 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 unfortunately, depressingly small amounts, 24/7. So how often you eat And then what you eat each time you eat determines whether you're maximizing protein synthesis. If you eat more often, you can go to slower digesting foods, so that way you're actually hungry enough to eat that often, and because by the time the protein digests from one meal, you're going right into your next meal. If you have longer time gaps between your meals, you have to increase the fat components in the meal, the dietary fat percentage of that meal, to try to slow down the digestion. Now, you can do that with a variation of carbohydrates. Maybe you pick a slower digesting carbohydrate. So maybe depending on certain meal times, you don't necessarily have to have fats. You might need to just change the carb source. But there is attention given to the macronutrient and kind of food choice breakdown per meal depending on frequency. So some of my clients, we might have, maybe they work out in the morning. So we have something we consume right before the workout, something right after the workout, then an hour later. Then maybe they have a 4-hour gap, another 4-hour gap, and then they eat something right before they go to bed. So what we eat whenever the meals are only an hour apart versus 4 hours apart is very different. There are categories of choices when I get down to this specific type of clientele. And when we get closer and closer to competitions, I just tell them literally the food I want them to eat. I'm like, eat, XYZ. There's no options. Eat it. Now, we do talk about what do they have to do in cases of emergency, if they have to do substitutions. We cover all that. But when you look at nutrition, what does it take for Chris Bumstead to be Chris Bumstead? What will it take for you to be the max version of you? Is consistency in calories, consistency in protein, and the right timing and macronutrient choices per meal depending on the timing, depending on what you have available to you, depending on what you're doing in that day, the type of activity you're doing. I'm going to come back on how you can learn all that in a second, but that's what we look at nutrition: calories, protein, timing, and macronutrient choice to maximize protein synthesis. Training, first of all, again, consistency. You have to do it consistent. If you have a training routine that's set to maximize 4 training days per week, you got to train 4 days a week. If it sets to maximize 5 days a week, then you train 5 days a week. Whatever the consistency is, you have to be consistent with that. So if the schedule is 5 days a week, you want to never miss that. If it's 3 days a week, then you never want to miss that, and really not. So the more workouts you have scheduled, if you miss one, it's a little less detrimental, but you really don't want to be missing training at all, because that's the stimulus for change. You eat to support the change, to fuel the change, but the stimulus for change is your training. So you really want to be consistent with both components. For training, especially in men's physique, if you want a physique like Chris Bumstead, you prioritize symmetry and balance over size. So the first thing you want to do is to kind of assess your physique and say, what is behind? What is falling behind? Do I have good legs, but I don't really have wide shoulders? Or maybe I have a really big upper body, but my legs look like little chicken legs. So whatever it is, you want to fix the thing that's behind. You want to emphasize creating symmetry and balance first, and then grow everything as a whole. But catch up whatever the hell needs to be caught up as fast as you possibly can. Get to symmetry and balance first, then grow. That is a good approach for classic physique. Okay, now, if we look at supplements, Chris has been very clear. He has not hid the fact at all that he does use steroids. He uses various types of anabolic steroids. He uses various types of diuretics when they get closer to shows. You cannot look like the way he looks naturally. You can look like the version of your best self naturally, but Chris didn't look like Chris. Chris doesn't look like Chris without all the drugs that he takes. He can look good. He can look amazing, but he will not look like the version of him that you are seeing on Mr. Olympia stage without drugs. So that's like testosterone. I believe he's taken Tren in the past. They take a lot of different diuretics. There's a lot of other type of drugs. So I won't go into all the names. But there are a lot of drugs that people will take to increase testosterone, to control estrogen and water retention, to try to maximize protein synthesis process while staying alive. They don't want to die, but they usually do, take a lot of stuff that has some risk to it. The smart ones will get blood work done very often. They'll try to do like a wave protocol to the type of drugs and the amount of drugs and the intensity of drugs that they take. In certain off season, you don't need to have as much control over body fat and dried out skin as you would leading into a competition or a photo shoot. There's certain drugs you need to take around competition times. Then there's drugs that you can take kind of at the other times, but you would try to take the minimum effective dose. That would be the idea, is what is the least amount that I have to take. So one of the things that's neat about Chris is one of the interviews I saw of him, I forget when, but he talked about why he doesn't say what he takes. Like why he doesn't just list it out. And he said it's not because he's trying to keep it a secret. He genuinely feels that if he were to say what he takes, people would just take it, thinking that that's how he became him. So that's how they will become him. And he's like, I don't want people to do that. I don't want people to just blindly take drugs that maybe it's the first time they've ever taken them. They don't need them as strong as I have taken them. Maybe they have different genetic response to them. So some pros have reported turning IFBB pro without any drugs. Ronnie Coleman was one of those people. People have talked about, and I don't remember if he's, I have not seen him or heard him directly make that claim, but it's been talked about a lot that he was probably turned pro, IFBB pro, without any drugs. But that's incredibly rare. Very, 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 very rare. But some people have genetic differences, just like one person could be 5'7", another one 6'7". People can have genetic differences in their responses to steroids. So what one person takes is not a prescription for what another person would take. 100% no. So just because so-and-so takes this does not mean that if you take that, you will become so-and-so. Absolutely 100% no. So he doesn't name what he takes because he doesn't want people to do it. He thinks it's misleading. And even though he tells you in his interviews, and I'm telling you now, that if you take what he takes, you won't become him, it's human nature to just be like, okay, well, if that's what he did, that's what I'm going to do. It's just human nature. It's hard to fight that. But he does take drugs, so it's important for us to know that. My recommendation, and what I'd recommend for all my clients, is to maximize your natural abilities first. See if you can get a natural pro card before you would consider taking drugs to become an IFBB pro. Really do work at, and I've helped people get IFBB pro cards and natural pro cards, so I've done both. Really do work at getting the natural pro card first. Now, there are cases where sometimes by the time I talk to somebody, they've already taken stuff, so that option's out. We got to go for the IFBB pro. So if you've not taken anything yet, I would recommend you don't. Get your natural pro card first. That way you're going to develop all the skill sets you will need for lifestyle management. And you're going to learn a lot about each competition, stage presence, prep, all the components. You're going to learn so much. So then by the time you would take drugs and try for the IFBB pro, you already have all that out of the way. You're not learning, newbie lessons when you're taking not newbie supplements. So it's very important to get all the newbie stuff out of the way before you would take drugs. Okay. Now, the other stuff that no one talks about, or well, not no one, but very few people talk about. If you're thinking, how can I look like Chris Bumstead? You're going to think of nutrition, training, and supplements and drugs. Absolutely. But what we also have to look at is creating the lifestyle that will allow for the consistency that you need. You must communicate with others what your goals are and what you will or will not do or not do. All that. What can they expect from you? So if you have friends who like to go out drinking on the weekends, and you can say, hey, I love our friendship. I appreciate our friendship, but I really don't want to go drinking on the weekends anymore. Can we find ways to still stay connected that doesn't involve alcohol? Yeah, sounds like a dorky conversation, I know. But it's important if you want to maintain that friendship. And just as a general character component would be is to give someone the opportunity. Don't cut people out of your life if you've not talked to them and maybe given them the opportunity to stay in your life. If they're a good person and you're a good friend, don't just cut them out of your life. Talk to them a little bit. Maybe without you knowing it, they also would like to give up the drinking on the weekends because maybe they don't find it beneficial for them. But they were afraid that you might judge them, so they never said anything to you. So you never know where somebody else's mind is. But communicating with other people is important. Communicate with your loved ones, your friends, family, and just know, hey, this is really important for me. This is what I'm going to focus on. This is how it's going to impact our interactions or what you can expect from me. I would love your support in this process, and I appreciate it if you can, do so. Blah, blah, blah. Something like that. Just talk to people. Be open with people. Communicate with people. Tell them what you want. People cannot read your mind. They have their own shit to deal with in life. They're probably not paying attention to your shit. So don't expect people to read your mind. Don't expect people to just be like, oh, well, I think they lift weights, so they're probably super healthy, and this is probably what they want. Tell them what you want. Don't do that to people. Don't expect people to know what you have not told them. That is not fair. So be open, talk to them, tell them what they can expect from you, what you would appreciate from them. Try to, cultivate the relationships in ways that allow you to still be your best. Okay? Next thing we look at is the reprioritization or the reorganization of our priorities. What do we do during the day? What do we do with our life? How do we manage our time? How do we manage our energy? How do we manage our finances? We are going to need to prioritize nutrition, training, and supplements financially. You're going to need to prioritize nutrition, training, and supplements schedule-wise. You have to make sure you get your meals in before X, Y, and Z happens. You have to make sure you get your training in before ABC happens. Where are you going to train every day? When is it going to fit in your day? How long time do you have? When and what are you going to eat during the day? How are you going to make that prepared? How are you going to have it ready? Those things have to become the kind of central focus of the day. Like having a doctor's appointment. And you'd say, okay, I have to be at the doctor's at noon. I have to do this by 11, this by 10, this by 9, wake up at this time. You plan your whole day as if every meal is a doctor's appointment, every training session is a doctor's appointment. That needs to be done so that you can be consistent. Next thing we look at for creating consistency in a lifestyle is stress management. You have to have margin to take on something as stressful as trying to be super freaking consistent with nutrition and training and supplements. It does not happen easily. It does not happen easily. So we have to manage our stress because eating correctly is an effort. Training correctly is an effort. Taking the supplements is an effort. Where is your emotional space for increased effort? Likely you're living at max capacity of effort. You cannot then just cram more shit in. We have to make space. You have to create some margin. You have to make room in your life for the efforts that nutrition, training, and supplements will take. So that needs to be accounted for, needs to be managed. Then we have motivation management. You will not feel like doing the right thing every day, all day. Hell no. So how will you stay motivated in the tough times? These are important for us to consider. For nutrition, what can you do to maximize your nutrition? It's free on our website, www.brutalirongym.com. Go to free nutrition education. The first document on that page is create your own nutrition program. Done. Training. It's free on our website, believe it or not. Isn't that amazing? Go to free program examples. Again, www.brutalirongym.com. Free program examples. You can click on general free templates and programs. And then we have, if you're overweight and you want to get a little leaner in this process, we have fat loss and shaping templates and workouts. And then we have female shape development. We have bodybuilding. So that would be the one if you're looking for, if you're going for a Chris Bumstead look, you would want to do the bodybuilding program. So you want to click on that. If you're a female who's listening to this and wanting to shape your body in the way that you would like, you're probably going to more so prefer the female shape development, but you can pick either one of those, male or female. The female shape development is more about shoulder width, upper back detail, and growing the glutes. So male, female, or otherwise, if your goal is shoulder width, upper back detail, and growing the glutes, that's going to be a good one. If your goal is overall symmetry, then the bodybuilding workout is going to be the better one. Okay? So again, all that is free on the website, Nutrition and Training. Supplements, well, we want to focus on what's needed for general health, digestion, and recovery, and then we would worry about performance. I know that that's not a sexy order. No one's going to like that order. No one wants to get a multivitamin before they get creatine. No one wants to get, a digestive probiotic supplement before they get a fat burner. I understand, but you can take my advice or you can leave it. I hope you take it. And you're going to want to focus on general health, digestion, and recovery first. You should take a joint supplement before you take some crazy pre-workout thing. Okay? So to learn more about supplements, we have a couple different podcasts that would work well. So we have podcast 1528. It's a Q&A podcast titled Glycerol Supplement and Growth Supplements. So if you want to learn about muscle growth supplements, that would be great. And then we also just have a recent podcast, number 1800, so 1-800, Q&A podcast titled Are Supplements Really Worth the Money? And then I talk about which supplements are the best ones to focus on. So those would be good podcasts to check out. Then the last things I want to leave you with is, unfortunately, more podcasts. But I know I'm already talking a lot, so I don't want to go too much longer. But if you want to learn how to balance being your best self while also trying to give your best to other people, that is very freaking hard. Absolutely hard. One of the hardest challenges I'm always navigating in my life is how do I take care of myself while still being my best self for others? Oh, man. Very, very challenging. But podcast 1642 can help. It's a Q&A podcast titled Balancing Your Needs with Helping Others. Pretty good title. You can find all these podcasts, by the way, on our website. We have a podcast player that goes back 300 episodes, but you can also, underneath the podcast player, is a description on how to find older podcasts. So podcast 1642, Balancing Your Needs with Helping Others. Then we have podcast 1023, is a mindset podcast titled Stress Management, Options and Priorities. So that'll help you prioritize things correctly and help manage your stress. Then podcast 1084, the last one I'll leave you with, is a mindset podcast titled Methods to Regain Motivation. So when motivation starts to wane, or smartly, do it before then, listen to podcast 1084. Okay, if you want to be Chris Bumstead, remember that what you can really achieve, what's achievable, is what Chris Bumstead is to Chris Bumstead is what you can be for you. Chris Bumstead right now is one hell of an amazing version of Chris Bumstead. 5-time Mr. Olympia version of Chris Bumstead. That's what he is for him. What can you be for you? What does your Chris Bumstead look like? If you can be consistent with nutrition, training, and supplements, if you can balance your priorities, balance your stress, create a lifestyle that allows for consistency, what could you be in 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years? What does your Chris Bumstead look like? Wouldn't that be fun to find out? So I hope you take everything we talked about today. Listen to the podcast, read the information, and then also reach out. Right now I'm offering free 15-minute consultations for anybody that wants them. If you want to work with me, it's a great way for you to kind of interview me and for me to interview you. We talk about what your goals are, what your struggles are, and then what we would do to address those struggles. Absolutely free. You can sign up on our website. Go to www.brutalirongym.com. Go to the one-on-one services page. You can sign up there, or you can just shoot me an email at brutalirongym@gmail.com. So, take all the information, reach out if you need the help, but if there's anything you ever need, whatever's going to help you be your best self, I'm always an email away, brutalirongym@gmail.com. Okay? If you like the podcast, please share the podcast. If you like the podcast, please consider donating to support the podcast, which you can do on our website. And if you like the information we share in the podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels. You can find us and follow us on Instagram and YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Gym. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.